The aliens believed Earth was powerless. Humanity let them think that. The Part 1. The Surin that wasn't. The Vossather dropped out of slipspace 11,000 kilometers above Earth, and Fleet Marshal Tren Kaalo of the Osaic Dominion watched the human capital burn. Not from weapons. From celebration, fireworks bloomed over a city called Nairobi. Streets choked with dancing crowds. Every screen his sensors could intercept showed the same thing. Humans laughing, humans crying, humans embracing strangers in the street. They are celebrating their own surrender, said Sub-Marshal Ethic, standing at his shoulder. Fascinating species. Kaalo said nothing. 3 days earlier he had delivered Earth's terms himself. Disarm your orbital defenses, hand over your fusion research, and accept Dominion oversight of your government, or watch your cities become craters. He had expected pleading, riots, mass evacuations into whatever caves this backward species still remembered how to dig. Instead, Earth's Secretary General had looked into the camera, smiled, actually smiled, and said 4 words: "We accept your terms." No negotiation, no stalling, no secret fleet massing behind the moon, as far as Dominion sensor arrays could tell. Just surrender, delivered with the calm of someone agreeing to a dinner reservation. It should have felt like victory. It felt like a trap Kaalo couldn't see the shape of. Bring the fleet in tight formation, Kaalo ordered. No ship breaks 100 kilometers from another. If this is a trick, I want us close enough to support each other in the first 3 seconds. Ithic's mandibles clicked in amusement. Marshal, they have 12 destroyers total. Chemical propulsion on 9 of them. We watched their defense fleet through a telescope for a month before we arrived. This is not a species hiding a trap. This is a species that knows exactly how outmatched it is. But none of this had begun that way. But Part 2. 17 years earlier, the signal arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. Amara Osei was the one who found it. Buried in radio noise from a survey telescope in the Atacama Desert, a rhythmic pulse, too clean to be natural, embedded in a tight beam transmission that had clearly been aimed, deliberately, at Earth. It wasn't a greeting. It was a scan. Something out there had pinged the planet the way a burglar checks a doorknob before deciding whether to pick the lock. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth had the data. Within 6 days, they had something history had never produced before. Complete, silent agreement. Not a treaty. Not a summit. A decision made independently and simultaneously by people who otherwise couldn't agree on trade tariffs, that whatever was out there, humanity would show it exactly one face. A fragile, backward, technologically stunted civilization with nothing worth fearing and nothing worth stealing. "They're going to come look eventually," said General Okafor Diallo, addressing the first joint session of what would become known as the Unified Earth Command, a body that officially did not exist. "The only question is whether they find a wolf or a rabbit. We are going to give them a rabbit. And underneath the rabbit, for as long as it takes, we build the wolf." Everything changed in the next few seconds, though no one in that room understood it yet. Diallo laid a folder on the table. Inside were sketches, crude, first-draft concepts, for something the engineers were calling Project Threshold, a ship that didn't just defend Earth. A ship built to be underestimated on purpose. The rabbit and the wolf, growing in the same house for 17 years. Part 3. The performance, humanity's public fleet was real. That was the genius of it. Nothing about the deception was fake, because faking it would have left evidence. The 12 destroyers were genuine warships, built with genuine chemical and ion propulsion, genuinely a generation behind what alien scanners would expect from a species that had, after all, only landed people on its own moon a century prior. Real budgets funded them, real sailors crewed them, real admirals commanded them, and this was the part almost no one guessed, even among the officers who served aboard them. Most of those admirals had no idea the ships they commanded were never meant to be Earth's actual defense. They were a magic trick's other hand. Beneath the Pacific, under kilometers of water and rock reinforced with alloys that didn't exist in any public patent filing, the Wolf was born in absolute secrecy. A project so compartmentalized that the electricians wiring its reactor core didn't know the shipwrights bolting its hull plates existed. And neither group knew what the physicists 3 levels down were doing with something they only ever called the mirror problem. Her name, when she finally launched in total silence 11 months before the Osaic Dominion arrived, was Prometheus. The council had made a terrible mistake, though it wasn't a council that made it. It was every alien intelligence service that had ever surveyed Earth from a distance and concluded, correctly by every visible metric, that this species posed no threat worth taking seriously. They were right about the metrics. They were wrong about what the metrics could see. Part 4. First Contact. Take 2. Fleet Marshal Kaalo's flagship settled into low orbit exactly as Earth's terms of surrender specified. Osaic engineers began the process of boarding the 12 human destroyers to inventory their reactors for research transfer, the polite Dominion phrase for confiscation. That was when Sub-Marshal Ithic noticed something wrong with the numbers. Marshal. The human destroyer, Resolute, its reactor signature doesn't match its hull class. Kaalo turned from the viewport. Explain. The hull reads as a Kestrel-class chemical ion hybrid. Standard human tech, 70 years behind ours, exactly as the survey data indicated. But the reactor bleed-through. Ethic's claws worked rapidly across the console. It's putting out heat signatures 40% higher than the hull's stated propulsion should require. Either their instruments are catastrophically miscalibrated, or that is not the reactor a Kestrel-class ship should have. Nobody knew what the human was hiding, not even, in that moment, Ithic himself, though he was the first Osaic officer to sense the shape of it. Recall the boarding parties, Kaalo said quietly. Marshal, that will look like. I don't care what it looks like. Recall them. He was 30 seconds too late. The Part 5. The mast comes off. Admiral Sarah Vauquelin stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched 6 Osaic soldiers march through her airlock like they owned the ship. Because as far as they knew, in about 4 minutes they would. She had commanded this vessel for 6 years. She had trained her crew on its real capabilities exactly 0 times, because the Resolute's real capabilities were, on paper, identical to its fake ones. That was the elegant horror of the plan she'd only been briefed on 9 days earlier. Her destroyer wasn't the trick. Her destroyer was exactly what it appeared to be. The trick was 200 kilometers away, running dark, transponder silent, hiding in the debris field of a decommissioned weather satellite cluster that Earth had accidentally left in a convenient shadow orbit 14 years ago. Admiral, her XO whispered. Orders? Vauquelin's voice didn't shake. Let them board. Let them look. Smile. The truth stunned the entire galaxy soon enough. But in this moment, it was still a secret held by fewer than 200 human beings, and Sarah Vauquelin was one of them. The Osaic boarding officer, a broad-shouldered creature with mottled violet skin, unreadable black eyes, ran a scanner over the Resolute's reactor core and made a satisfied clicking sound. Primitive, he said in passable English, translated through a collar device. As expected. We do our best, Vauquelin said. Behind her, unseen, unheard, 200 kilometers away in the shadow of dead satellites. Prometheus received a single 3-character burst transmission from Earth Command. Go. Part 6. The Dreadnought breaks stealth. Fleet Marshal Kaalo felt it before his sensors confirmed it. A wrongness in the electromagnetic hum of near-Earth space. Like a held breath suddenly released. Then the debris field 200 kilometers off his portside flank stopped being debris. A shape unfolded out of it. Not gradually, instantly, the way a nightmare arrives instantly, no matter how long it's been building. 800 meters of hull that had been engineered, plated, and painted specifically to scatter Osaic scan frequencies into background noise. Reactor cores that had been running for 17 years at a fraction of capacity specifically, so their heat bloom would read as cosmic radiation. A ship that had spent its entire existence pretending to be nothing, unfolding into something Kaalo's threat assessment computer didn't have a category for, but no one expected what happened next. Prometheus didn't fire. Not yet. She simply was, sitting in open space where a moment before there had been nothing, her running lights the color of dried blood, her silhouette wrong, in a way that made Osaic pilots' hands freeze on their controls out of pure animal instinct. Marshal, Ithic's voice had lost its earlier amusement entirely. Marshal, that vessel's mass reads at 40 times our flagship. Reactor output is, he stopped. Started the readout again, as if the numbers might change. Reactor output is off our scale. We don't have a scale for this. On every human screen still broadcasting from the surface, screens the Dominion's own intelligence networks were monitoring. The fireworks display over Nairobi kept playing. The party kept dancing. Because the party had never been for the Dominion's benefit. It had been the last beat of the rabbit, timed to the second, so that the exact moment Prometheus broke stealth, every Osaic analyst watching Earth's public feeds would be looking at joy and relief instead of watching for a warship that had never existed on paper. Humanity hadn't surrendered. Humanity had been waiting. The Part 7. The voice from the dark. A transmission cut through every Osaic channel simultaneously. Not hacked, not intercepted. Simply sent with an ease that told its own story about whose technology now dominated this fight. Fleet Marshal Kaalo. A woman's voice, calm, almost gentle. This is Captain Elena Reyes, commanding U.S. Prometheus. You have 6 of our people currently occupying 6 of our ships. I'd like them returned. peacefully if that's still available to us. Kaalo's claws had gone rigid on his armrest. This is not possible. Our survey data was accurate, Reyes said. Every ship you scanned was exactly what it appeared to be. We didn't lie to you about anything you looked at. We just made sure you never looked in the right place. A pause. You're a professional soldier, Marshal. I imagine you can appreciate the difference. The Queen suddenly froze, though there was no Queen, only Kaalo, sitting very still, running through 17 years of Dominion intelligence reports in his head and understanding, in one sickening cascade, that every one of them had been correct, and every one of them had been worthless. What do you want, he finally said. Not a question, a demand dressed as one. Right now? For you to recall your boarding parties before this gets complicated. After that, Reyes's voice hardened, just slightly, the first real edge in it. After that, we're going to have a longer conversation about why an armed fleet arrived in our system to deliver an ultimatum backed by threats against 6 billion civilians. I have opinions about that conversation, Marshal. I don't think you'll enjoy them. Part 8, The Six. Aboard the Resolute, the Osaic boarding officer's collar translator crackled with a priority recall order from his flagship, relayed with a tone his mandibles had never heard from Kaalo before. Something close to fear, disciplined into a command. Admiral Vauquelin watched him respect. Watched the violet skin around his throat ripple with what she now understood. After 6 years of exposure to alien biology briefings, was the Osaic equivalent of a cold sweat. Problem, she asked pleasantly. He didn't answer, he didn't need to. His squad was already retreating toward the airlock at a pace just short of running. Professional discipline fighting a losing battle against instinct. Admiral, her XO murmured, should we let them go that easily? Yes, Vauquelin said, and there was something almost sad in it. We want them to leave. We don't want them to die learning why they should have. That wasn't even the biggest surprise the Osaic soldiers carried back to their shuttle. The biggest surprise was waiting for them the moment they cleared the Resolute. He's hull and looked up. Really looked, for the first time, at the thing sitting in the dark 200 kilometers away, no longer hiding, no longer pretending. Its running lights the only warm color in a sky that had just turned very, very cold for the Osaic Dominion. Part 9. What the Dominion didn't know, Fleet Marshal Kaalo had built his career on thoroughness. He had personally reviewed 40 years of intelligence on Earth before accepting this command. Geology, weather patterns, radio chatter, television broadcasts, the full sprawling archive of a species that had, by every measure his analysts trusted, spent the last century arguing with itself instead of preparing for the stars. What he hadn't known, what no one outside 200 cleared human officials had known, was the story behind Prometheus reactor. 17 years earlier, in a lab beneath the Nevada desert, a physicist named Dr. Amara Osei, the same woman who had first caught the Dominion's scanning pulse on a Tuesday morning that changed everything, had cracked a problem her own government had quietly nicknamed the mirror problem. How to generate fusion output an order of magnitude beyond anything on Earth's public grid, using a containment method so radically different from Dominion physics that Osaic scanners literally couldn't recognize its signature as a reactor at all. They'd read it as background stellar radiation for 17 straight years, because it didn't look like any reactor they knew how to look for. Humanity hadn't outbuilt the Dominion's technology. They'd built something the Dominion didn't have a word for. The princess had overlooked one crucial detail. Though princess wasn't the right word for a fleet marshal, and the detail wasn't crucial so much as it was the entire war, compressed into a single strategic assumption, that a species can be measured by what it shows you. Part 10. The Reckoning. Kaalo did not order his fleet to fire. Whatever else could be said about him, he was not a fool. And a man who was not a fool did not open fire on a ship 40 times his flagship's mass, while his own boarding party was still strapped into an unarmored shuttle drifting home. Instead, he did something that cost him more than combat ever could have. He opened a direct channel, ship to ship, and said the hardest sentence in the Osaic Dominion's military vocabulary. Captain Bias, I request terms. On Prometheus's bridge, Elena Reyes let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Behind her, junior officers who had trained for this exact moment for years still looked at each other like it hadn't quite become real yet. Here are our terms, Marshal, she said. You return to Dominion space. You carry a message to whoever sent you. Earth is not a resource to be cataloged or a threat to be neutralized. We are a species that would very much prefer to meet the rest of the galaxy as neighbors. But we will not be dictated to, not today, not ever again. And the next fleet that arrives here with an ultimatum should understand exactly what waits behind our front door. A pause. Then, Quieter. The words that would end up in every human history book written in the following century, though Reyes herself never intended them as anything more than the plain truth. We let you believe we were powerless. That was never a threat. It was mercy. We wanted the chance to prove we didn't have to be enemies before we proved we couldn't be conquered. Part 11. What Kaalo saw later, years later in fact, in a memoir he wrote after retiring from a Dominion military that would spend a full generation revising its doctrine on primitive species. Fleet Marshal Kaalo would describe the moment his shuttle cleared Earth's gravity well for the last time. He looked back once. Just once, Prometheus hung in the dark behind the retreating Dominion fleet, her running lights steady, her weapons, which had never fired a single shot, not once, through the entire encounter, still silently trained on every ship in his formation. Not gloating. Not threatening. Simply, present the way a mountain is present, indifferent to whether you respect it, because your respect was never the thing keeping it standing. Everything changed in the next few seconds, he would write. Not because of what they did, but because of what they didn't do. They had a warship capable of ending my fleet in minutes, and they used it to say 4 words. We'd rather be friends. I have served the Dominion for 60 years. I have never been more afraid of a species, and never more certain that we had, for the first time in our history, met one worth trusting. Part 12. The Wolf sleeps again. 6 months after the Dominion fleet withdrew, Admiral Sarah Vauquelin stood on an observation deck overlooking a shipyard she wasn't officially allowed to describe to her own extended family, watching Prometheus settle back into a maintenance dock, her running lights dimming to standby. Dr. Amara Osi joined her at the railing, older now than the woman who'd first found a signal in the radio noise, gray threading through hair that had once been jet black. They'll come back, Osi said. Not a question. Someone will, Vauquelin agreed. Maybe not the Dominion. Maybe someone who heard what happened and wants to test it themselves. That's how it works. It always is. Are we ready? Vauquelin looked at the great dark shape resting in dry dock. The wolf that had spent 17 years pretending to be nothing, and would spend however many years came next standing quietly in the dark, ready to unfold again the instant Earth needed her to. We built her to be underestimated, Vauquelin said, not to be weak. There's a difference, and it's the only reason we're having this conversation instead of digging out of a crater. She turned from the railing. So yes, we're ready. We were always ready. That was the entire point. Below them, work crews moved across Prometheus' hull in the amber light of the dock, tending to a ship that the rest of the galaxy still, officially, did not believe existed. A rabbit's mask hanging quiet in a closet somewhere, ready to be worn again the next time the stars sent someone to check whether Earth's doorknob turned easily. It never would. Not again. Humanity had learned 17 years and one silent Tuesday morning ago exactly what it took to be left alone. They had let the galaxy believe they were powerless. They had simply never said, for how long.